The Soviet army, trapped on the northern flank of Army Group Center, holds out, presenting stiff resistance. The high casualty rate of German armies and armored units begins to have a major impact on effectiveness. Soviet line west of Kiev retreats as its southern flank is threatened by the advancing 17th Army. Army Group Center reports being unable to proceed toward Moscow as fierce Soviet counterattacks east of Smolensk grind the advance to a halt. Order is given to stabilize the German line here and to conserve forces rather than advance further. The Fourth Army abandons the city of Gomel to avoid having its line overextended too far on the southern flank. Army Group North advances after the retreating Soviet force around Ostrov, encircling the city garrison. Army Group Center finally begins its first rest and refit phase, despite considerable risk of Soviet counterattacks. With Ostrov captured, the advancing southern half of Army Group North faces a fresh Soviet defensive line at Pskov. Soviet counterattacks force Army Group Center to condense its front. Strong Soviet forces are present at both ends of this precarious line. The Bi-Monthly Review. Army Group South struggles to receive the supplies and fuel it needs to advance. For some time now, High Command has focused all of its efforts on supporting this advance, with considerable cost to effectiveness of the North and Center Army Groups. The main focus of activity for Army Group South is now on the impending capture of Kiev. Army Group Center holds its ground, but its line is overextended. Heavy Soviet presence here poses a considerable risk. Orders to set these armies to a defensive posture or to retreat them are deemed too time-consuming and difficult. Army Group North, mostly ignored by High Command, is ordered to hold its ground rather than try to force its way through the hardened Soviet line. Relationship with generals and High Command in the North is greatly strained as focus and assistance is given to Army Group South instead. General von Lieb has taken to ignoring commands out of spite. Soviet forces west of River Dnieper are cleared, with most having retreated across. Counterattacks south of Smolensk present such a threat that Army Group Center is ordered to retreat across the river and hold its ground. Army Group South crosses the Dnieper, both north and south of Kiev. Despite the risk, Army Group Center proceeds to attack the Soviet line around Smolensk in an effort to harass the Soviets. Attacks produce moderate success and, temporarily, alleviate pressure on Smolensk. The weather begins to turn colder and wetter. The mud season has arrived. Army Group South completely encircles Kiev, but not before the Soviets manage to destroy the bridge across the river Dnepr. Approval is gained for winter equipment to be prepared, though the first delivery cannot be expected before late in December. Kiev is captured by Army Group South. Repair efforts on the rail bridge begin. Hitler calls a conference and dictates a new strategy. The primary objective is shifted from Rostov in the south to Leningrad in the deadlocked north. German High Command struggles to shift its focus accordingly, with both logistics and personnel at a breaking point. Under stress of Hitler's new objectives, Army Group North begins renewed offensive operations. Conflicting orders and personal friction between officers result in a vastly reduced effectiveness on the field. A major Soviet counterattack begins against Army Group Center, driving back the greatly reduced divisions. The weather grows colder. Mechanized divisions, previously stuck in mud, are able to move again as the ground hardens. The Soviet line at Narva proves unbreakable with the currently available force. Army Group Center, already greatly diminished by extended combat operations, agrees to detach the 2nd Panzergruppe north. The plan is to use the transport line east of the Valdai Hills and to cut off Soviet supply lines to the Luga and Narva regions. Only 2 half-strength mechanized divisions and 2 weak armored divisions are available for the maneuver. Army Group North advances after a Soviet retreat into more defendable positions. Cold weather hampers troop effectiveness. The bridge at Kiev is repaired just in time before the river freezes over. Soviet attacks against the Smolensk rail line threaten fuel supply. However, due to poor logistical state, no trains are running at this time anyway. The 2nd Panzergruppe crosses the operational boundary and enters the northern theatre of war. Army Group South, now lower in priority, reports unsustainable supply lines and lack of fuel and supply. Forward elements of Panzergruppe 2 encounter retreating Soviet divisions in their path north of Novgorod. Soviet reinforcements arriving from direction of Moscow threaten to cut off the flanking maneuver. Despite Lake Ladoga freezing over, the 2nd Panzergruppe manages to cut off the Soviet line of supply. However, strong presence of Soviet rearguard troops and reinforcements, along with an acute lack of fuel, threaten the fragile operation. Soviet offensive north of Smolensk decimates the 9th Army. Soviets break open their line of supply in the north, only to have it cut off again. Out of desperation, German High Command coerces the Finnish army to move on to Lake Ladoga to further threaten the Soviet line of supply. The political outcry over this action sends the German High Command into disarray. Soviet reinforcements re-secure their line of supply. Panzergruppe II headquarters is cut off. Heavy counterattacks further reduce what remains of Army Group Center, which teeters on the verge of collapse. Army Group South is paralyzed by freezing temperature and lack of fuel.